Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to Book Trek 2023, the Summer of Trek. This is a BookTube event created by Vin at Revenant Reads a couple of years ago, where he gathers booktubers together to celebrate Star Trek fiction in all of its shapes and sizes. And Book Trek is sprawling over the whole course of the summer. The summer is synonymous with Star Trek for me, and I think for a few of my co-hosts too. It just seems more of a summery type thing, even though plenty of my Star Trek watching was done in the winter. It still doesn't matter. Especially reading the books always strikes me as a summery type thing, which may account for why I have been overdoing it. I have been overdoing things, as is my wont, just a little, by making a video every day. And I don't know that I'm going to continue that in July, but I thought I'd finish out the month of June going strong with a video every day, with a video for today. And today, I am returning to a book about a long-standing Star Trek nemesis. But it's not the Klingons. There's books about Klingons. Yes, it's this. It's Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Armageddon Sky, by the writers known as L.A. Graf, which I'm told stands for Let's All Get Rich and Famous. This is Day of Honor. This is another one of the Day of Honor books. I read one just recently, and I was tempted to go back and read another one. But the long-standing nemesis here is not the Klingons. It's the curse of Terok Nor. It's the curse of Deep Space Nine, which is a Star Trek show that I very much like. But Star Trek fiction that I have almost never liked, almost nothing that I've read has been any good at all. Oh, hi, baby. Are you going to give them some Frieda yoga? Uh-huh. Okay. Oh, you are. Oh, right to your toes. Oh, oh goodness gracious. Oh, Frieda yoga and the suicide bunny. You can't ask for more in a Star Trek video. Now she's going to burrow. She's taken lately to burrowing. She never used to do that, but now she does. Now she burrows like crazy. What are you doing? What? Oh, God. Oh, God. You never get anywhere, though. You burrow like crazy, but you never get anywhere. Oh, goodness. Oh, goodness. You won't care about this more than you do about Star Trek anyway. Baby, what are you doing? You're going crazy. What's the matter? Can't get comfy? Well, that doesn't look comfortable. Baby, what are you doing? Oh my God. Oh my God. I don't know. I may have hitched my wagon to the wrong species. Anyway. I have been dealing with the curse of Terok. Terok Nor was the Cardassian name for the space station Deep Space Nine. And I have been dealing with the curse of Terok Nor for 3 years now on Book Trek, where I simply cannot seem to find a Deep Space Nine novel that's any good. And this strikes me as extra ironic. It always has, because there is at least one great Deep Space Nine novel to be told. I think more than one. I think at least two. But one, certainly, is someone, my candidate has always been Jake Sisko, since he's a writer, telling the story of Deep Space Nine, which has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It simply does. It simply does. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. The space station Terok Nor is handed over to the Federation by the Cardassians. The Federation renames it Deep Space Nine and gives it a commander, Benjamin Sisko. Benjamin Sisko is not taking over from a previous Starfleet commander. He is starting a Starfleet presence on a space station over a planet that has just come through a brutal military occupation. Which is why he has hired all sorts of Bajoran citizens as members of his security staff, presumably his administrative staff too, although we never see an administrative staff. And also, his first officer is a Bajoran national, a Bajoran freedom fighter who has been given a military rank, colonel, by the Bajoran government. Uh, that's all new. That's a brand new start for things on Deep Space Nine. There are holdovers, and of course the Cardassians want the station back. There's very little fuss made about that. But that's the beginning of the story. And Benjamin Sisko, who is a widower, takes his young son to the station. Then time passes, the son grows up, the station gets involved in all kinds of things, but especially the Dominion War. And the whole time that it's involved in all of those events, and on the front lines of the Dominion War, there's a subplot, because the Bajorans don't think that Benjamin Sisko is human. We never know exactly what Colonel Kira Nerys thinks about Benjamin Sisko. She knows him personally. She works for him and knows him personally. But does she revere him as a religious figure? Does she revere him as the emissary? I don't think we ever really know. But the Bajorans do. And then the story climaxes and ends. Now, there's still a Starfleet presence on Deep Space Nine, and some of our characters hold over, just as some characters held over from the Cardassian occupation. Odo, the shape-shifting constable of the station, for instance, Quark, the bartender. Some people hold over from the time before Deep Space Nine's first episode. And there are holdovers from after Deep Space Nine's last episode, but I don't want to spoil that last episode in case you haven't seen it. But a very clear line is drawn in the sand. There is a beginning, a middle, and an end to this story. It would make a great story. It would make a great story. As a novel, as a story told from the point of view of an adult Jake Sisko. You could call it the story of Deep Space Nine. And it would be great. You could fill it all. It would be not only a great story about the whole arc of this, but also a coming-of-age story. It would be Jake Sisko reflecting on what it was like to grow up around all of these incredible people. What was it like to spend time with them? There are all sorts of moments that you could add to a book like that. I think it would be great. And the other book, at least one other book that easily suggests itself, is the story of the emissary coming to live on a space station that you can easily see from the ground of Bajor. Again, I don't think that's ever actually stipulated at any point in Deep Space Nine. I don't think we're ever told whether or not the Bajorans can see Deep Space Nine as a star in the sky from the surface of their world, but they would certainly be able to. If they have replicators and phasers, then they have telescopes. They can certainly see it. And a lot of them believe that their emissary lives there. Now, he's a human, but he's in direct mystical communication with the aliens who live in the wormhole. What do the Bajorans think of all this? What do they think of the wormhole? They must be able to see it with telescopes in operation. Whatever made them think that there were aliens in the wormhole? And what do they think of Benjamin Sisko during the whole time that he is on? In other words, one of the most tedious aspects of Deep Space Nine, the Vedics of Bajor, the priests and priestesses and whatnot, they're one of the most tedious aspects of the whole show, mainly because some of the actresses that they got to come on do really fine work elsewhere, but they have no idea what they're doing in science fiction, and you can't get them over it. You can't get them over it fast enough to rescue their work. Anyway, those are two books at least that could be told, but they haven't been, and as far as I know, they never will be. Deep Space Nine is long gone in continuity. This is all 30 or 40 years ago. How many years before the events of Star Trek Picard Season 3 was the Dominion War? Do we know? In continuity, it's probably 30 years, something like that. Nevertheless, this was a viable Star Trek property. Deep Space Nine was. So once you had a machinery of 4 new Star Trek books a month, you had to come up with a Star Trek Deep Space Nine novel every month. And the other franchises, it seems to work. This one, it doesn't. And I think I know why. I think I have an explanation. Lord knows I've had reason to ponder this enough. And the reason is that Deep Space Nine abandons episodic storytelling. the episodic storytelling that had absolutely guided the original series and Star Trek: The Next Generation. Deep Space Nine does that for a couple of seasons and then completely abandons it in favor of telling one huge continuous story, which Star Trek had not done. And when you do that, every episode is filling in the next chapter and not leaving any openings. Once hostilities with the Klingons break out again, and then once they are healed over again, and then once the Dominion War starts, it's not like any episode of Deep Space Nine can open with, it's been a year since our last episode. No. And once there's a war, once the wormhole has been mined, once there are Jem'Hadar ships prowling everywhere that will kill you if they find you. They're not doing a game of cat and mouse. They'll blast you out of the stars. Once that's true, well, then the opportunities to have the kind of adventures, planet by planet, enigma by enigma adventures that are the staple of Star Trek fiction, those opportunities go away. And I think they do in Deep Space Nine, and there's really nothing for that. There's really no help for it. There's not the price you pay for how excellent Deep Space Nine was is that you remove the possibility of episodic novels. Something like that, I think, is true in Star Trek Voyager as well, certainly after the introduction of Seven of Nine. Before that, the show leans heavily into Planet of the Week, Mystery of the Week, with the ongoing through line being, we must get home. But still plenty of room there for adventures of all kinds. Until the quest to get home, the introduction of Seven of Nine and the Borg, starts to sharpen it into that timeline being very concretized in a way where if you did a novel, you would now have to specify exactly when and where it is in the timeline. Whereas with the original crew or with Next Generation, you don't have to go to anywhere near that much bother. Things stay the same from one episode to the next, largely. And with Star Trek Enterprise does the exact same thing. It's possible that you could do some novels set in the very first few months of the original Enterprise's adventures in space, but they leaned heavily into serialized chapter-by-chapter storytelling. And the same thing is true going forward from there. I mean, Star Trek Picard, I think Star Trek Picard Season 3 would make an incredible novel. I wish that I could write that novel. If Paramount would let me, I would put everything aside and do it. What a book that would be. Oh, what a book. It would make a terrific novel. But, and the novel would be a lot of fun to write because you could add all sorts of interiority, which is what a lot of Star Trek authors do when they're adapting screenplays. They just add interiority. They don't have much else room to move. And that's all that writers can do with Deep Space Nine, really. That's all that happens really here. I mean, there is a plot line here. It's in the Day of Honor series, which was an idea that the Trek producers did to link all of the 4 series together. There are Klingons that are involved in all 4 series, so you can sort of link it together. Revolving around a Klingon Day of Remembrance where they remember what it is to be the heart and soul of a Klingon. It doesn't work in this book. It isn't really much attempted in this book. It's a kind of a framing device. This is much more a Klingon adventure. Where a group of main characters from Deep Space Nine go to a planet on which is holed up a remnant of stubborn Klingon holdouts who are loyal to Worf's family, to the House of Mo. And as you could tell from the cover, we also get Commander Kor, John Colicos' character from the original episode, from the original series, who reprises his role a couple of times on Deep Space Nine, totally wonderfully. It's mysterious, but it's odd. It raises lots of questions. All 3 of our named great Klingon commanders from the original series reprise their roles in one great episode of Deep Space Nine. We get Koloth, Kang, and Kor all at the same time. And they're all old and gray. It raises questions like that because we had never been told during the original series, during the Next Generation, we had never been told, nor had it ever been hinted, that Klingons can live for 200 years. That not only had that never been said, but it seemed counterintuitive. But there they are. Really, and really, can you blame the showrunners if you can get all three of those actors to reprise their roles? Would you ever not? Would you ever say no? You'd come up with a way to do it. And Kor also has a great episode in Deep Space Nine where he is facing debility. He's not the stereotypical Klingon on the top of a stone staircase fighting off a horde of foes until one of them gets in a lucky strike. He's facing debility. He's losing his memory. He's becoming a little bit feeble, or a lot feeble. And that's a fate worse than death. He's horrified by it. And the episode gives him a chance to go out with a blaze of glory, and it's incredible. It's incredibly done. That episode, those of you who know Deep Space Nine will know the exact episode that I'm talking about, that ends with a pull-away shot of a Klingon cruiser in the darkness of space, just flying along, but there's singing in the background. Very Russian sub-esque. But Kor is in this book. He's not particularly well done. He seems out of character. Actually, he seems out of character. A few other characters seem out of character. Jadzia Dax and Worf are beautifully done here. Odo is refreshingly very well done here. But again, this was really, really good. This was really well done. Very energetic. Better than the last Day of Honor book that I read. Really, really enjoyed it. So I'm not meaning to run it down. I think it is just up against the Curse of Terok Nor. That's all. Because all through this book, even at the climax, there are sort of a double layered, very effective climax at the end of this book. And even then, I was thinking, okay, but where does this happen? When does this happen? Is this between this episode and that episode? This doesn't seem to fit. That doesn't seem to fit. I thought we were given to understand that Kor was a little bit old and feeble. It doesn't seem so in this book, but this would have been around the same time as the episodes where we're told that. And what about the Cardassians? It doesn't seem right in here. Where does this fit in the continuity? I wouldn't care so much about those kinds of questions if this were built on an iteration of Star Trek that was mostly episodic. Then I wouldn't mind so much. I know there are Star Trek fans who devote their whole life to setting everything in continuity with pinprick precision. But an episode of the original series, where you have an opening note saying this novel takes place in the first 5-year mission of the Starship Enterprise, Bob's your uncle. You're done. You can do more than that. You can deeply embed it in continuity, but you don't have to. Whereas with Deep Space Nine, you kind of do. And this doesn't. I have a feeling, I don't know anything about L.A. Graph, I have a feeling that this adventure story was probably written before and then sort of retrofitted into the Day of Honor series. I have a feeling that probably the Day of Honor series was approved. Maybe the original series novel was already in the works or on the storyboards or whatnot. And the powers that be said, well, okay, we need a Klingon novel for each show. And the others maybe were a little bit further down the timeline and so were a little bit more adaptable. This strikes me as that it could have happened anywhere. Which is a shame, because as I mentioned with the last Day of Honor episode, this could be really interesting to do in relation to Worf. Not so much Kor, but Worf. Worf's relationship with being a Klingon is just as interesting as B'Elanna Torres' relationship with being a Klingon. In other words, he has one. Whereas Kor, the Klingons from Kor is the focus of the first Day of Honor book by Diane Carey. And the Klingons in the original series don't have any trouble. They don't have any relationship with being Klingons. They just are Klingons. And in the Next Generation, well, Worf is right there, and we only get the vexed nature of his relationship with the Klingons when that show starts to give us the Klingons in the main focal point. But Worf and B'Elanna Torres are both characters who have had to think long and hard about what it means to be a Klingon, which is not something Kor has ever needed to do. Maybe in the context of Deep Space Nine, it might be something that General Martok has had occasion to do, we are in another great Klingon moment in Deep Space Nine. We are given J.G. Hertzler, the actor who plays Martok, does a great performance of just talking to Worf. Martok tells Worf his story, his origin story, and it's very, very good. It's probably an origin story that's mimicked by a lot of nameless Klingon soldiers that we see and never see again. It's just Martok happened to be lucky. But with Worf, son of a disgraced house, son of a declared traitor, raised on Earth by humans who are not military at all, who are actually cuddly, forced to decide, what is it? Who am I as a Klingon? Am I a human who happens to look like a Klingon, or am I the ultimate Klingon to compensate for my upbringing? And same thing with B'Elanna Torres, where she thinks that the very fact that she's half Klingon and half human is the thing that drove her parents apart. We don't get any of that here. This is extremely snappily done, but we don't get any of the stuff that we could get. I think this was done on a script, on spec, against deadline, like so much Star Trek fiction. And that's a shame. And I don't actually understand why that is still true. I realize that studios are weird. They're not like you and me. But even the mirrored sunglasses bean counters at Paramount have to look at something like Deep Space Nine as an IP and say, it's not anything to us. We're never going to do a Deep Space Nine movie. We're never going to authorize a Deep Space Nine animated show or anything like that. We might hold on to it for a video game series. There's a video game series featuring Deep Space Nine, mysteriously poorly done, mysteriously poorly designed. Benjamin Sisko doesn't look like anything like Benjamin Sisko. Kira Nerys doesn't look anything like Kira Nerys. And most importantly, the wormhole looks wrong. You might say, what's the difference? It's just a special effect. No. The showrunners for the original Deep Space Nine put care and loving concern into every detail of the show. And those of you who know the story of the show, Deep Space Nine, you will know the wormhole, when it opens, has a particular flourish. It looks like a hand opening. It was very much meant, in discussions, formal and not, it was very much meant to underscore the Bajorans' idea that maybe this is a living thing, or a collection of living things. It isn't just a swirl of colors when a ship goes through. It looks the same every time. It looks like the fingers of a hand unfurling. Except in this video game, this Fleet Command video game, where you have 7 seasons of Avery Brooks's face in all 3 of his facial expressions. There is no conceivable reason why your video game version of Avery Brooks's Benjamin Sisko shouldn't look like him. It should look exactly like him. Anyway, we're going to wrap up the first month of Book Trek with this book, which is probably going to cause me to go on and read the other 2 books in the Day of Honor series. There's The Next Generation and also the original series. And the original series is by Diane Carey, who's my favorite Star Trek author. And I think probably that's the only one of these things that I've read. Or at least the only one that I'm going to remember. I remember her book. I didn't remember anything in here. Really liked it, though. Was never tempted to stop reading. So, talk about a mixed review. There you go. A little bit of a mixed review as we say goodbye to the first month of Book Trek. I am still hashing out what to do with Book Trek. Do I keep making a video a day? Do I branch out to movies or the Strange New Worlds TV show? This latest episode of the Strange New Worlds TV show highlights everything that is great about Strange New Worlds and everything that stinks about Strange New Worlds at the same time. That is amazing. That usually doesn't happen. Usually in the original series, for instance, if you get a stinker of an episode, there isn't going to be anything good in that episode. It's just going to be a stinker from snout to tail. But in Brave New Worlds, no. No. In Brave New Worlds, I could talk for an hour about just that one episode. My review of just that one episode would be as long as the episode. Hinging on one thing, and it's very subjective. The Vulcans in my audience will disapprove. It's very subjective, which is that I love watching this show. I shouldn't love it, but I love watching it. The perfect combination of incredible chemistry among the cast and stunning visual effects. means that when an hour of Strange New World starts, anyway, I don't know what I'll do for July. Probably fewer videos, but I don't know also, will they range afar? I don't know. We'll see. But I've had a blast for this first month. And I'd love to know what you've been reading. If you've been reading any Star Trek for this month, I'd love to hear about it. But anyway, I'm going to wrap this up, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.